I know you won't get slow down till the no good funky knuckle groove. Baby, 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 that'll help for you. Yeah, it's most definitely on a roof.
All right, everybody, thank you for rejoining. We've got a very exciting panel up here next, focused on festivals. First, wanted to thank the Relix team for having me, putting together this group. You know, to state the obvious, I'd say festivals have become a huge part of the live music business in the United States, obviously globally. You know, incredible amount of risk, and you know, I'd say without a doubt the most debate about what works, what sucks, what's cool, what's not. And we're going to try to cover that for about the next hour with this panel of experts. So I'll let the group introduce themselves. They all come from different walks of life. And if you guys don't mind, maybe mention a little bit about what you do, how you touch festivals, and we can go from there.
Sure. I'm Kevin Browning. I co-manage Umphrey's McGee. We obviously touch the festival space for a long time in a lot of different ways, just by playing and performing at a number of festivals throughout the country and the world for that matter. So we see it from, you know, I look at it from the artist side about what's good for bands, what's good for growing fans, making new fans, and that's sort of the angle that I come at it from.
Hi, I'm Kelly Viau, and I'm with Cloud9 Adventures. We are based in Delray Beach, Florida. And for about the past 15, actually it's going on 17 years, we've been focused on the space of concert vacations and niche market, intimate experiences where artists can really engage with their fans in meaningful ways in a smaller atmosphere while vacationing at the same time.
My name is Ginny, and I've had a long history in the music industry doing a bunch of kind of disparate things that are all somehow woven together. So it's a little hard to say my direct relationship with festivals, but I'll say I started out tour managing the Roots for many years. So I was on the artist side, touring the world and playing festivals, so I got that experience. I've done production. I've helped produce the Roots Picnic every year for 11 years. So I've watched a festival grow from kind of a small entity into something much larger. I ran media companies. I'm the former vice president and of Okayplayer and the co-founder of OK Africa. So from the media side, we've covered festivals. More recently, I've really been involved in activism, and I produced the Women's March on Washington, and I really thought about how, thank you. Thanks. I thought about how that space, I think I integrated a lot of what I learned in the music curation and festival space and brought it into that experience. So that's sort of what I've done.
My name is Kunj, Shah. I run a company called Live for Live Music, which is, you know, it's on the media end as well. We cover a lot of festivals. It has a marketing component to it too, so we're doing a lot of marketing for different festivals across the board. I have a couple of festivals that we put on. Brooklyn Comes Alive is one of them. It takes place here and a couple other venues in Brooklyn. It's like walking distance, kind of artist-forward festival where artists create their own lineups and their own bands. And then I'm a partner in a management company as well where, you know, we play a bunch of festivals across the country, and yeah.
My name is Biasha, and I manage strategy for Eventbrite in the music division. Eventbrite is the world's largest ticketing and live experiences platform. We processed more than 200 million tickets last year in 2017 in 180 countries. And we focus primarily on independent venues and festivals, working with 1,800 independent venues across North America. Very excited about that. My background actually is in music festivals. Prior to Eventbrite, I managed major credentials operations, logistics, production for music festivals like Bonnaroo and Coachella, and worked deeply with the Rothbury Music Festival that became Electric Forest. So have that sort of deep festival background and expertise.
Survive credentials.
Survive credentials, I probably gave you all your passes at some festival or another.
That's
or
great.
not, or denied you. Probably not.
Thanks, everybody. So, festivals, I think, we probably all have seen can be a very, widespread and a bit overused word. I mean, just to ground the conversation a little bit, I'd like to hear from everybody, what is a festival today? And I think it's evolved probably since everybody's had their various iterations. But in today's live music ecosystem, because that's what we're talking about, what's your view? What makes a festival in today's market? And maybe, I don't know, since you...
Yeah, so obviously we we have the largest number of events and events creators on Eventbrite in the planet. So we see a lot of different festival events. And I think it's pretty fuzzy right now, what is a festival? And what we're seeing is sort of three main trends of the kinds of festivals. One is, the first I would say is sort of what I call hybrid events, or the evolution of the transformational festival. So, we all know that music festivals brought in yoga and brought in extra speakers and things like that. And now what we're seeing is events that are truly hybrid. So Wanderlust Yoga and Music Festival is a really good example. They have now been in business for 10 years, working in 17 countries. And this concept of having multiple types of content, I don't know if anyone knows what goat yoga is. Goat yoga? I didn't really know either. It's yoga with goats, baby goats walking on your back. And on Eventbrite, we saw 75 goat yoga events last year, in 2016. This year, there were 2,400 goat yoga events. So this hybridization of event experiences, which super interesting. The second trend...
You're not alone.
Yeah. Anyone? I mean, I love yoga, but I've never done goat yoga. The second trend that I would say we're seeing is around charity and causes. So we did a study last year, and we found that 80% of the study participants believe that connecting live for a cause or an event is important. And this, in the inaugural Women's March, which we were very, very proud to participate in, we had more than 1 million registrants just on Eventbrite for events around the globe, and obviously a lot more participants than that, but we were able to communicate with those people. And on Eventbrite, we saw a 30% increase in charity and cause-related events from 2016 to 2017. So we believe that charity and causes, and it touches music festivals too. So we work with a major music festival in California, and they focus on food and wine and music. And when we looked at their data, we found that the kinds of events that their attendees are going to on Eventbrite are actually, we look at like the other kinds of events, like aside from this music festival, what other kinds of events are they going to? And we found that that charity and causes was the third category events behind music and food and wine. And then the third trend I'd say we're seeing is this artist-led experience, which I think you all probably can speak to a lot better than me, but we're seeing things like, Dave Chappelle is still continuing to put pop-up shows on Eventbrite with no notice. That's really fun for a ticketing company, ticketing a 200 cap room for Dave Chappelle. But we're also seeing things like Chance the Rapper putting his birthday party on Eventbrite and donating all the proceeds to a charity. So it's really been an interesting time in events.
I think just at the base level, the simplest level, a festival is generally the fostering of a community, the gathering of people in a space to create a community outside of the norm or at least your day-to-day. And therefore the parameters that you put on it about where it is or how many bands have to be there or what other types of ancillary activities have to be there are really flexible and open-ended. be it destination or festival, street festival, you know, in your backyard. At the end of the day, it's about gathering people together for a sense of community.
Yeah, I echo those sentiments, absolutely, Kevin. I mean, for us at Cloud9, it really is about fostering community. I think festivals as a whole, like looking at the root term and where that came from, it's a gathering surrounding often a feast of sorts, I think is kind of the origin of that root word. And I think anytime you can gather in a room like this, a group of like-minded individuals, things happen, people get inspired, and you do have a lot of opportunity to foster that creativity, the inspiration, the innovation, and you know, whether it's young people who are going to a festival for the first time, they're discovering, you know, maybe that there's a whole world of people out there who they share a lot more in common with than they ever thought, to discovering new bands, to tapping into that collective consciousness, which can be so powerful. And I think maybe we'll get into that a little bit more as we go. Also, I want to speak to service. You know, it's such a fantastic trend to see that growing in the event space, and I'm so glad that Rachel brought that up in the introduction. To me, it's kind of a non-negotiable. Service, absolutely, I think, needs to be integrated into everything that we do. And it doesn't have to be something massive. It can be the smallest, from the smallest gesture to the largest. And the key is just activating and becoming aware and realizing the importance. And festivals really are a platform, I think, for all of those things to happen.
I think with that uptick of interest in festivals collaborating with sort of give back causes, I think it'll be really interesting to see the creative ways that that's integrated into the festival and experiential landscape, for sure. I totally agree about community and everything you guys said. I think the other component about sort of what makes something a festival in my mind is this idea of an authentic connection. I think it's the same thing as sort of when you go to see a live artist perform, but you're looking to sort of make some sort of real authentic connection with the talent or with the experience. Whether it's, you know, I'm looking at the lineup for the Roots Picnic this year, and there's a podcast stage, there's a stage with gaming and with a fashion show and with an art component, a visual art component. So I think it's about connecting with people in some sort of authentic way, in real life too. I think that's important because I think the festival experience, there conceptually could be the idea of the digital festival, right? But I think that what draws these crowds is still the idea of in real life, live community and interaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think the festival is, you know, any event that's a little bit more than the headliner that's coming to play it. You know, there has to be an extra element to it where it's on the festival producer to kind of curate that experience. It's not on the band that's coming to play. You know, people know that Bonnaroo is a good festival, and they're awaiting the lineup, but a lot of people, you know, my favorite parts about Bonnaroo are going to the pop-up dive bar that they recreate from New Orleans, Snake and Jake's, and, you know, seeing things like the Calliope stage or Calliope stage. And, you know, it's something more. Electric Forest, they have the entire forest to go explore. And it's a little bit more than the headliner that's coming to play, bringing their own production. You know, I think the festival organizer has to really step it up and create a community and a vibe and service.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think, you know, you guys all touched on this through different parts, but it's really about the experience, right? And it's bringing people together. Oh, go ahead,
one
Kelly.
thing we also, just to state the obvious, I mean, let's be real, festivals are also parties, and
yes.
That's okay too.
That is true. That's true. It's to get people together, get them off the couch, have a good time, connect. You know, I would say in today's world where there are festivals in every market, all different kinds of festivals as we talked about, really it's about experience, right? And through that experience you create a brand, which I think in a world where these festivals have a lot of risk and have you know, a lot of money behind them and a lot of work, the brand's really important. You know, and you see things out there where people are going to festivals for decades at a time, where people are making big investments to spend multiple days traveling somewhere, getting people together as groups. And I guess a question for the group is, how do you create that brand loyalty, right? And what goes into the experience? If it's, you know, a multi-day, you know, multi-venue experience in a city, or if it's a party in a field or a camping experience, you know, back to, I think, Kelly's service point, right? What's going to get people to keep coming back and really enjoy the festival and keep doing what they should be doing. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that from your...
Sure, go ahead.
Well, Kunj started to touch on it, but I think that the best festivals are the ones that take a very heavy-handed, active pursuit of creating a vibe that is truly unique and out of the ordinary. And just like you'd invest in production and stage and lights and sound, you are invested in, you know, tricking out the forest, and you treat it like it's its own headliner. It gets the attention to detail to create something that when people are walking through, that they are, you know, truly transported to a different place. Or creating experiences that are unique to whatever it is that you're trying to cultivate as the brand of your festival. Whether you're hitting out of the batting cages in the middle of Bonnaroo, or there's so many things that can be unique to whatever it is your event is, and I would way rather see somebody be true to who they are and what they want that vision to be than to try to be all things to all people. So, you know, figure out what it is that you do and you do well, and don't be afraid to be niche in that regard. I feel like the wider you try to play to the mainstream a little bit, the more diluted your event tends to get. So for me, it comes down to those unique elements outside of whatever's going on the stages.
Yeah, I would go a little bit further with that too, Kevin. And I mean, at an event like Holidays, which we've been really fortunate and blessed to work on for going into our 12th year, you know, the artists are in a space where they're able to also let their hair down and to be a little bit more experimental. Maybe it's musically, maybe it's connecting with other artists. Maybe it's that one time of the year where they're really all together in the same place for an extended period of time. And it's really the artists being on their toes and being relaxed and expressing their creativity in new ways, I think that tends to keep fans coming back for more and more. And equally, giving people a chance to connect and nurturing the fan base. Like, there's so much to be said for nurturing the core audience of a musician, and getting to spend time together over a number of days doing things that are meaningful together, whether that's laying on the beach, whether that's going out with Positive Legacy, our nonprofit arm, and doing a service-related activity. Whatever it is that fosters those connections. I think, you know, there's some people in this room that were talking to me about One Big Holiday, and what an amazing, amazing time they had at my Morning Jackets event down in the Dominican. And it's as much about the music as it is about the hang. And it's the hang for the fans themselves, it's the hang for the artists, and all that kind of comes along with that. So the music is obviously first and foremost, but it's all the other things that kind of happen in the space between, I think, that keep people coming back for more.
So one interesting thing that I think keeps coming up is these artist-led festivals, right? And then on the other side, these, you know, I'd say throughout the industry, a lot of festivals that are trying to be all things to all people and headliner-driven. I mean, what does it really say? And you know, this trend that if it's the Roots or you guys or what you guys have done with the jacket, you know, where artists are sort of taking this industry and saying, we want to create these experiences. What does that mean to this group?
I think, so it's kind of building off this last question as well, but I think for the Roots Picnic, so I noticed this parallel. Two of the most exciting, fun festivals I've ever been to, the Roots Picnic, obviously, but also this festival called All Tomorrow's Parties, ATP, that I was at years ago with a really small independent project, a woman I was managing called Secretary, and it was artist curated, and that year was curated by the Dirty Three, who are friends of mine, and we were out there, and both of those festivals have such an incredible sense of community within the artist community. So the musicians are looking forward to it. The bands, the acts, they're making connections backstage. They're collaborating. They're sort of crossing over and talking with each other in performances, even on stage. And I feel like that environment creates something unique that's sort of outside the experiential, programmed piece of the festival that creates an ambiance, a vibe, that sense of sort of something original or authentic that I was speaking to before. And I feel like that's an important, that really drives the brand and the basis of the brand of what you think of when you think of the Roots Picnic. We did some content capture with Okayplayer. Every year we sort of do video recaps of the festival and stuff, and I was interviewing a ton of artists, and what I just kept hearing was, you know, a lot of times when I play a festival, I'm going to work. This feels like I'm really enjoying myself. I'm really present. I'm excited to be here. I'm super excited to watch these other artists, to collaborate with them, to connect with them. And I think that's something, I don't know, that's something special to me.
That's why the ArtistsLed Festival works as well as it does, because, again, you put the bands together in the situations that you want to foster those kinds of things, where everybody feels like it's not just going to work. You create the space to allow those things to happen, and when it's artist driven, there tends to be a much more clearly defined path of what you want it to be, what you want to get out of it, what experience you want to deliver to the fan. Whereas you don't always get that if it's something that is clearly promoter-driven. Let's try to sell as many tickets as we can, and sure, we'll put a whole bunch of different bands across all sorts of genres, but you don't take the time or the care to make those pieces fit in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and I think to that point, right, these festivals and the brands and experiences we're all talking about are art, right? And so you have artist-driven festivals. You also have, I think, some of the great entrepreneur sort of creative-driven festivals where you have a true soul that somebody's put into it, and that turns into a brand and then turns into a culture, and it's about maintaining that culture. And I think one of the things that I think a lot of the journalists in this room touch on is saturation and the sort of glut of festivals in every market. And if you have a rich uncle with a field, or you have a bank account, you can book a bunch of bands and pray. And I think we're all seeing that's a lot harder than most expect. But what's really standing out is these brand-driven soul experiences. And I think one of the interesting things that is critical to that is music, right? And the artists are able to do it because they can call their friends and they can tell people they need them up there, and they create these musical moments. I think what's been created at Lockin's unbelievable, where you see special collaborations like what's being announced at Dead & Company in Brantford and others. I mean, how hard is it, I guess, just turning into forward with millennials in the digital age and social media to keep creating these experiences that feel one-off, right? You have to go and be there. I mean, if an artist says be there, that's really powerful. I think if there's a soul to an experience where you're only going to see something there, that's powerful. But how hard do you guys think it is to keep creating these experiences? Are there too many? Do you think there's still white space? I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on the opportunity there.
I mean, with Brooklyn Comes Alive, we basically do that for almost every band that we have on the event. We can't compete with like a Live Nation or an AEG, so we put together events that are, musician driven. The highlight is on each one of the musicians, so we try to create something brand new with every single band on every single slot at every single venue to create once in a lifetime experiences. And the idea came from New Orleans and Jazz Fest, and how you can walk down Frenchman Street, and any bar that you go into, you'll see a musician pop in from their gig next door, just jump on stage for 45 seconds or 4 to 5 minutes, and absolutely slay it. And we try to create those types of experiences where you can walk from here to walk over to Music Hall Williamsburg and see something brand new, and then walk over to Rough Trade and see something new.
And I think that what's interesting is that people are still going out, right? People are still going. We hear about all these cancellations and things like that, but the data shows that 4 out of 5 people in the U.S. go to a live event, go to a live experience every year, and I think that there might be a mismatch between sort of supply and demand of festivals in terms of a large festival that has a headliner that you can see in every market. There is a large festival with a headliner or a set of headliners that you can go and see in your own market. So why would you travel to Tennessee or these other places to see the same artist? But because people are still going out, what are they going to see? Like, what are they doing? And I think at the end of the day, is these independent, boutique, smaller experiences. And we talked about artist-led festivals, but there's also genre-led. So Afropunk is a really interesting example of a genre-led boutique independent experience. We had a festival in Sacramento the other weekend called Soul Bloom that just focuses on new soul R&B, and they killed it. You know, they 6,500 cap, again, small, niche, boutique, and they're doing well. And so I think if we think about what do people actually want to experience, it's perhaps not the giant mega festival anymore.
Yeah, I think that's also generational to a degree too. You know, I think as we get older and we, you know, get a little pickier, maybe we don't have as much time on our hands we do have to pick and choose, then I think it's not the same as like the 18-year-old kid or the 16-year-old kid who's going, wow, I have to go to fill in the blank festival because that's what you do when you're that age, you know? And I think a lot of us had that same experience at that age, or we might not be here doing what we do. So I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying, but I think it's also, you know, there's a whole generation of youth that are like dying to get out and just get in the car and go, you know, so.
Yeah, I think you're talking about like the experience economy is people, we did a study last year on sort of the experience economy, like what do people, what do they care about? And we looked at millennials and we looked at boomers, and with millennials, 9 out of 10 millennials went to an event in the last 12 months, and 3 out of 4 millennials we talked to said that they value experiences over things. So I think generationally, you know, we used to care about that red Corvette that we could buy when we were 18 or maybe later. And now it's about being able to go to a live experience and Instagram it. But interestingly, boomers also care about this, and that's shifting as well. So 3 out of 5 boomers actually had the same response, maybe a little bit less than millennials, but they care about experiences over things. And boomers are spending about $100 to $500 a year on live experiences. And if for those of you who are content creators, they're going to about 8 dating-related events a year. Just fun fact.
To speak to the saturation point a little bit, I think that really depends on the perspective at which you're looking at it. I think the difference between are there too many festivals, if you're looking at it as a fan or as a promoter, you know, in the way that a promoter, a small or independent promoter is going to feel versus, you know, Live Nation and AEG there's a pretty wide gamut there. And then from an artist perspective, so from a fan perspective, I'm not sure there can ever be too many festivals as it relates to a fan. They get more choices, more value. They can be hyper selective about what they want to go see, where they want to see it, what kind of. There's never been a better time to be a music fan. I think it's tough to be a smaller or mid-sized promoter because you are one tornado, one flood away from bankrupting your event, and that's, you know, what we've seen with the roll up on the big side is you guys have come in and acquired a bunch of those festivals, put a lot more capital in, people taking on some of that risk, so that you know, you can take bigger chances, you can spend more money on the experience, you can pay bigger headliners, and you get a little bit of breathing room. Now that I do think that in some cases can fundamentally change the landscape, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. The homogenization a little bit of lineups where you could put 50 bands on a card, and if it didn't have the name of the festival, you could guess 3 festivals, and you'd be 75% right as to all these bands are at those places. And then just to the artist side, I think generally having a lot of choice is helpful for being able to pick and choose the type of events that a band wants to play. You do also, however, run into, when you go to route a tour and you look at all the events happening in all the markets, you can all of a sudden run out of places to play if you don't want to compete against these events in those markets. So you got to get creative with the way you route. So just depends on how you look at it.
I think it's just also, I think it's a matter of creativity. So I think as a fan, when you look out at the landscape, there is a lot of repetition, a lot of same old, people doing, like repeating the same pattern. But for everything that exists in that space, you look up and you see goat yoga, and there's something really creative and innovative happening. And I think that, like I have a dream of doing old people's festival where like don't take my idea. Or come talk to me and you can buy my idea. But like the whole backstage is like, the whole audience feels like a backstage where you've like cushioned couches and bottled water and hot tea and snacks and food, and it's all over by 7:30 so we can go home and be in bed. I just want to create a festival for like that I would want to go to, right? Like it's not too crowded. So, I feel like it's just a matter of how creative people get with the conceptual aspect of what the festival is. I also think, though, from an artist perspective, I see that it's frustrating for artists that are not in the sort of mainstream canon of corporate music, that aren't that are sort of outliers, more independent artists, because I think that it's very hard to break through that seal and get on the landscape of booking agents and get booked on these festivals. And I think there's so much incredible talent that's overlooked because they're not in the sort of more traditional vein of like they're just not on the map in the same way that other artists are, who are represented by certain agents or management or with a certain label or whatever. And so I think it's kind of a shame, because I think you see the same artists being booked around the globe over and over again, and the opportunity for all these other artists is getting overlooked.
Yeah, I don't think there's too many festivals. There's just too many of the same festival. There needs to be more curated events, more hybrid festivals, more goat yoga, and things like that.
I'm going to have a class after this.
Yeah.
So it sounds like everybody feels there is more opportunity in the marketplace to serve people. I think one thing that's really interesting, overall in the world today, people are talking a lot about diversity, right? And are we serving every audience, or are we serving one too much? I mean, maybe we can speak a little bit about diversity in the festival landscape. I mean, do you think there are, I guess in the United States, underserved audiences that people, especially people in this room, should be focused on?
The $1 million question.
I do.
One word answer, yes. No,
I mean,
yes.
I think, so this is another project that I'm involved in. I have an all-women's chorus, and we sing protest music. And it's called the Resistance Revival Chorus, and it was born out of the Women's March. And we do a monthly showcase called the Resistance Revival Nights, where we uplift progressive causes. But the sort of secondary mission is it's a platform for women in music. And I think in general, we always have to be aware of what's going on in the landscape when it pertains to diversity. I think, so I read we had one of our nights last night, and I read some of these statistics. There was a study on inclusion in popular music from the USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism Division. And so some of these stats, I'll just read you like 2 or 3 short ones, but a total of 899 individuals were nominated for a Grammy Award between 2013 and 2018. A staggering 90.7% of these nominees were male, and 9.3% were female. Over the last 6 years, 0 women have been nominated as Producer of the Year. The gender ratio of male producers to female producers is 49-1. So look up that study. It just goes on and on and on. But I think that like being intentional about how we're programming these spaces, who we're allowing into spaces that have traditionally ignored or marginalized certain groups of people is really important and really critical. I think the Roots Picnic has done a really good job of trying to keep it very eclectic, trying to be super inclusive both genre-wise, racially, gender-wise. I think that thinking intentionally about centering women in music is something that I would love to see more of in the festival landscape. And I don't just mean singers and background vocalists. I mean women instrumentalists. I mean, all women bands and projects. So I think it's a shame because I feel like it's usually on the back burner of a lot of people's. It takes a secondary seat to what people are mostly thinking about when they're thinking about programming. They're thinking about draw.
Well, we saw some really interesting things on Eventbrite after Black Panther came out, and the number of events that people were popping up on the platform to support the film, and there were thousands and thousands and thousands of these events that people were just renting out a movie theater and creating a cultural event around a movie, which I thought was really, really fascinating and put a place that there's incredible opportunity for sure.
I think Forbes just put out an article this week that said 19% of festivals acts are female. And obviously, that leaves the rest to men. I'm actually kind of curious from your perspective what the thought process is when you guys go to program, how much of that is at the forefront versus let's make sure that we do the business.
It's a huge focus. Part of why I asked the question. I think male, female is really important. So is race, and I think we're making a big effort to create new events, work in new markets, and try to focus in those areas. So and obviously we love doing good, and it's all right, but it's also for profit, right? There are, to my question, there's huge opportunity in serving these people. I think the team of Afropunk has filled a huge niche. I think what Roots Picnic, it's a lot of women's initiatives, and I think just generally, if we could program in a more diverse way, you could sell more. Rule of thumb, you could sell more tickets to the macro events. So it's a huge area of focus from an organizational standpoint, and in terms of investment, absolutely.
And I also think that when you look behind the scenes, behind the curtain, organizations like Live Nation, like AG, when they focus more on diversity and inclusion in their hiring, when there are more people of color, when there are more women in positions of power, you're going to see it's going to be reflected in the programming and in the festival landscape.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of a lag there, but happening real time, which is really exciting. One last question, then we'll turn it over to Q&A. I'm sure we'll get a lot of questions. From a discovery standpoint, right? When festivals started, at least coming from Europe to the US and all the amazing festivals that we all dreamed we were at, or maybe some people in the room were at, it was a lot about discovery, right? You weren't seeing all of those amazing acts in one place. You may not be able to see some of them live, but you're seeing them all on a weekend. So you'd go stay in the middle of a farm, or you'd go wherever you could to a speedway and sleep in your car to see those acts. Do you think in today's Spotify, YouTube, social media-driven age, festivals can still be a place for music discovery for fans?
Absolutely. All those tools are great and they're helpful, and I actually think they work in tandem with somebody who is willing to go check out Umphrey's on Spotify and then sees them on the bill at a festival that they're at is probably more inclined to walk over and check it out. I can tell you from our standpoint, we balance the amount of festivals we play and where we play with our own evening with shows, and we think about it from the perspective of, okay, festivals are generally, and it depends a little bit on the type of band or act you are, but festivals are a great place to go to get in front of new ears and new open-minded music fans that are there to find something new. So they're very valuable in that regard. At the same token, the opportunity cost of what you give up for playing a festival, it can be significant. Take a festival like Lollapalooza, you're looking at a radius clause that's 6 months before and 3 months after and 300 miles. That rules out a lot of markets. So you have to make sure that the festival plays that you choose to do you think are worth the new eyes and ears that are going to be laid on you in order to sacrifice playing Chicago the 9 months around that one date, right? Like, that's a big commitment. So we look at it as where are the markets that it would be valuable for us to go do a festival, try to make some new fans, and then you come back the next time through and do a hard ticket play. So we look at it 2 or 3 plays in advance, and that's sort of the strategy we use for trying to figure out what and where.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of bands that I've listened to on Spotify that I didn't really love until I saw them live, and vice versa. And for the the acts that I manage, there's so many people that are always coming up to me and going, "Oh, I saw Aqueous at this festival, and they blew me away, and now I'm a fan." So I mean, it's great for discovery, but I do understand the point of wanting to play, evening with shows as well, because you also want to be able to get in front of your fans, and radius clauses could definitely prevent you from doing so.
Okay, let's turn it over to Q&A. I think we've got a mic up front. Anybody raise their hand, he'll find you.
Hi there, my name's Neil. I'm from Ireland. I work for a digital music company called Anderson. We use audio analysis to directly link unsigned musicians with industry executives. I was just sort of wondering, from the festival producer side standpoint, where we're coming from, the likes of Live Nation events through to the Roots Festival. What specifically you guys look for when you're booking festival slots? Is it purely social stats, or are you looking for that sort of diverse audio library of different acts?
Well, for the Roots Picnic, I work very intimately with the Roots management, with Questlove, who really hand curates most of it, but we've been sort of a support structure for him. And every year they come to me and say, "Ginny, who are the weirdo acts?" And they kind of call them the weirdo acts. And it's basically, it's about diversifying genre-wise. They want emerging, cool, underground musicians who are really interesting and doing something new and innovative. And Questlove has his finger on the pulse of a lot of those. I think they definitely are, part of a more mainstream festival culture at this point. They are looking at draw, they are looking at their big headlining names, but they're also looking at making sure that they can be the kind of festival that puts Lil Uzi Vert next to Dirty Projectors. And I think now that's not so unusual, but when they started 11 years ago, it was really unusual. And I think the fact that we had, white indie rock next to urban music, next to jazz. It was weird. This year's festival, we have Sun Ra Orchestra was one of my recommendations on the festival. We have a young artist, upcoming woman named JoJo Abbott. Most of you haven't heard of her. She's just phenomenal. So it's not all draw and all numbers. They're really intentionally seeking to make an eclectic, diverse, inclusive, and interesting landscape that you can navigate through. And I think that a lot of festivals have kind of taken that cue, which is interesting to watch.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, I'm not booking festivals myself, but speaking to a lot of people who do, I think it's about that brand and curation, right? So if you're trying to find an audience in Napa Valley with Bottle Rock, you're booking Snoop Dogg because he's not a big draw, but he might be on the food stage with Morimoto rolling sushi. And you're booking Chad Smith from the Chili Peppers because he's going to play drums on pots and pans. So you're building that food and wine experience. And I think, to Ginny's point, things have evolved, right? I mean, evolution is sometimes good, sometimes bad, but the lineup of Coachella today or Lollapalooza today is obviously very different than when it started in the late 90s and 2000s. So it's about serving an audience and trying to build your brand to where you want it to be. Right there in the back.
Hi, when you guys were talking about what you describe as part of a festival experience, there wasn't much mention of social media, but today we have Instagram museums where people actually go just to take those photos. So when you're planning your festivals or putting your artists there, how much thought is put into the aesthetic of it and what you think people will take photos of and ultimately share and create more marketing for your event?
I think there's no question. If you look at it, it's a good question. It's something that's absolutely worth touching on because it's a huge part of the landscape, and it's on both sides, right? We have a culture that is, particularly the younger culture, where everybody's keen on being seen, sharing the experience. Look what I'm doing. Look where I am. And brands have been very quick to make sure that the kind of activations they have are the kinds of things that you want to take a picture in front of, and you want to share the cool piece of art, sculpture, or whatever it is. And those things tend to be at a lot of the festivals branded, and you can they're encouraging tagging, and so it works. I think it works both ways, and there's actually it's smart marketing on the branding side, because everybody wants to share with their friends where they are and what they're doing, and it plays into the look at me culture that we sort of are in the middle in right now.
Right, and I would just add to that, at the same time, I think for us at Cloud9, it's really important that it's authentic, that the branding is integrated into the experience itself, and you know, being on a cruise ship or being on a beautiful beach somewhere kind of lends itself to that naturally. And I think on the other end of the spectrum, you have, you know, what we saw at Coachella, where, you know, I mean, you saw pictures of people taking pictures. You know, I don't think that's just a natural byproduct when it's kind of developed that way. But absolutely, I mean, social content is huge. It's also, so the life cycle is a millisecond, but it's vital at the same time.
We've obviously invested really heavily in sort of integrating ticketing and social media, and actually right now announcing our Buy on Instagram integration that literally just got announced, I think, maybe 5 minutes ago. But for us, we did a test with Life is Beautiful on sale on Instagram, and people are buying tickets through Instagram because there is an experience, like, I'm more excited about the Buy on Instagram than any of our integrations that we've announced to date, because I do think people want to see the experience, and if you're curating that experience on site, and then actually taking an action and saying, I want to go too. I want to go tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, for Brooklyn Comes Alive, we'll have a team of people, you know, going live from different sets and, you know, putting up stories. And I think that really creates, you know, a sense of FOMO, for lack of a better word, for people who are, you know, at home. You know what, this is going on 5 minutes away from my house. I'm going to get up and go. Or this is going on tomorrow also. I'm going to be there. So, you know, we do take that into account when, you know, we're putting on an event like that to make sure that, you know, people that aren't there have the ability to see what's going on. Maybe they come next year.
I think for better or for worse, also, we're going to see more and more. I don't know how many of you saw Refinery 29 this year did the 29 rooms exhibit, which was just 29 curated rooms that were like artistically built out, like mini sets, perfectly built for you to take your Instagram photo in front of. And it was beautifully done. It was really an amazing experiential situation, and I think that we're going to see more and more of that integrated into the festival world. I think you already see like the pop-up tents becoming more and more decorated and curated and set-like and built out with Instagram in mind specifically.
Yeah. Next question up front.
Kind of speaking to that last question, when you're putting festivals on like in the middle of the woods, it, you know, sometimes could probably be pretty hard for people to have signal, and I'm sure that there's work that has to be done in order to make it so that people can have Wi-Fi and post their things to their Instagram to kind of generate that interest. So what kind of work has to be done, you know, for maybe, let's say, smaller scale festivals that are trying to get into it, you know, like 1,000 people going to venues that may not have Wi-Fi available? What kind of things can be done to kind of help with that?
I mean, your other option is cell towers, right? So you've got to have, it's actually essential. We partner in a festival summer camp down in the middle of Illinois, Chillicothe, Illinois, and early on, cell towers were not that good there, and we had limited Wi-Fi, and over the years, it's been a combination of our own investment in the infrastructure as well as the reality of the world sort of growing up around it. So it's actually something you can't overlook when even just choosing a site. If you, I mean, you can create an event in the middle of nowhere with no coverage, and if you do, like, you run with the fact that you can't communicate, right? Like, that's a cool thing in its own right, so own it. But it sucks if you're like, you almost haven't, that you know, people will get frustrated to no end if they can't, if they want to share. But if you know, if you don't have the opportunity, you can flip it on its head and go, hey, let's make this thing, you have to be here, and then we'll share after.
I think also, like, I think that technology hasn't quite caught up yet to our impulses and where we're heading. When we did the Women's March this year, and this has happened at festivals, this happened at the Roots Picnic in the past, but our Wi-Fi cut out at about 8 a.m. We got on site at 3 a.m. By 8 a.m., no one could send anything because there was a mass. I mean, they had planned a march for 250,000 people, and we had over 1 million people. So
good problem to have.
Yeah, great problem to have. But also, as long as anyone has a phone, even if you have that festival in the woods, if you're not securing people's phones, you're still going to have all the social media. The minute they get a signal, the minute they get into range, it's going to start posting to their Instagram. So I think another thing that's interesting is Dave Chappelle's model to like protect himself for his live comedy specials. You have to put your phone in like a lockbox when you check into his shows, and you get to hold it. It's some, this device, but you just can't access your phone. And at the end, they unlock it, so you can't record any of his jokes. But that would kind of be an interesting model for a festival.
Yeah. You're seeing that more and more. I mean, you're seeing Jack White do that this year, and I think it's as opposed to Dave Chappelle, who's I think protecting Netflix dollars, which is cool, and jokes. I think a lot of these musicians are doing it because they want people to be there. And I think to the Instagram question, I think the opportunity in the woods. I expect you will see more and more of that, right? People saying, let's actually be there, and I think there'll be a premium to it because of how connected we all are.
Yeah, I was just going to say, too, I mean, I think if there isn't connectivity, maybe you build that into your media plan and you put more focus and more attention on telling the story before and after the fact, and also activating with people who do have connectivity to be posting from off-site, somewhere remote. As a parent of 5 teenagers, I just want to say, don't be afraid to put the phone down. You're at a live music event, you're having an experience. There's something really magical to be said about just being in the bubble and go offline and get kind of swept away in the music and the experience that's around you. Connect with people that you're sitting next to. And I think it also does a great service to the artist, too, when they're not looking out and seeing a sea of phones. So it's a great question. It's definitely a need. On the other hand, if it's not there, don't be afraid to embrace it for what it is.
A few hands on the side here.
Yeah, I'm Brian from Charlotte, North Carolina. My group, SJD Presents, we're more interested in the micro festival experience, the one-day, 6 to 10 hour event. Something I'm interested in what like Pisgah Brewing is doing in Black Mountain, North Carolina, with their couple bands, or like what Oscar Blues is doing with their picnic and such. Our group started in Music Yard, Charlotte, 6 weeks ago. It's basically a free event where we have different teaser events. We utilize Eventbrite to manage the free ticketing. Our last week we had a Harley Davidson activation. We had Bedlam Vodka activation. This upcoming week we're doing a Twerk for Your Beer event, trying to get people out. I guess my question is, these events are free that we're putting on, being funded by the 3 T's, tacos, Tecate, and tequila. This fall, we plan to move to selling tickets. What do I need to be worried about? Because that's a big leap from going to a free event and then saying, oh, you have to pay $10 to come to this outdoor space, or whatever it may be. And then also following up for like Kevin and Kunj, how do you convince those the artists on your roster, oh, this is a worthwhile event. You need to be booked at this.
Well, I mean, you pitch the idea. If they like the idea, they'll do it sometimes. Sometimes it takes a little coaxing. Sometimes it takes a little bit of booze. Most of the time, it takes a little bit of booze.
One of the
T's.
Or
you let the artists come up with their own ideas sometimes. What do you want to do? What's something that you've thought of, but you thought would never work, or a promoter would never go for it because it doesn't sell tickets, or you don't know how many tickets it sells, or how much it's worth. And that's what we really try to take a chance on, is to see if there's something that one of the artists has in mind or has always been wanting to do, or a combination of musicians they've always wanted to play with but never had the means or the nerve or the relationship to go out and ask them.
I think I've seen a lot of, obviously putting your event up, a free event on Eventbrite is a really good idea because you can get your data capture going as well as communicate with those fans. I actually like moving to a paid model because you actually will, the problem with free events is have these huge RSVPs and then people don't show up because they found something else better to do and they don't value your experience because it was free. But I would recommend starting with a very low ticket price at first, like the $10. And your fans, you got to explain to them why. Why did you move from free to paid? It's most likely a sustainability thing or a permitting thing. I've seen that as well. But what I love about it is you do get people to commit, and then you'll know how many people are actually coming to your event versus a free event where you could see like a 60% no-show rate for some reason or another. But if you charge $5 or $10, people actually show up, which is great.
You could start off with like a suggested donation the next year. You know, donate $10 and have people at the front collecting the $10 and then slowly transition yourself into a $10, $15, $25, $75 event over the course of years if you want to put more money into talent.
And Afropunk actually did it pretty interestingly because they had that same transition, and they did things like you could pay for expedited entry, which allowed there to be some incentive or guaranteed entry, some incentive. So there was still a free component, but you moved to a paid model.
They also did a cool thing where you could do service could discount your ticket price. So if you were willing to give back and participate in various activities of community service, it would reduce the cost of your ticket.
Really hard to logistically manage, but awesome.
I think we are out of time. We're being waved off, but I want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you to the great panelists.
Thank you.
For your expertise, and I look forward to the rest of the day.